everybody. Hello. Hello, everyone. Welcome to our panel tonight, hosted by Vivobarefoot. And our theme of the evening is reconnect, restore, and regenerate. Tonight is all about how we can reconnect with nature, why we're all here at COP is really about we've become disconnected, and all the problems that have happened is because we've lost our link to what really matters in the natural world. So tonight we're going to delve into what really matters to us as humans and what really matters to the planet that we get this. We're really, really honoured to have back on the stage again Lily Cole, who opened up the conference with us on Monday when we did a very moving panel about youth speaking out, and it was very powerful. Lily is a climate activist. She's a major international actress, and she's also an author of an incredible book called Who Cares Wins, which is an incredibly valuable insight to possible and practical things we can all do in our lives to make everything better in our own world and in the bigger world. So I'd like to hand over now to Lily, who can't stay with us very long. She's got to leave because she's got to go into the Blue Zone to host something. And she's generously come and joined us first. There'll be some other panelists join when Lily leaves, but over to you, Lily. I think they've arrived. They've arrived? Oh, Atosa, are you here? Come and and they've just come back from the march. Yay! Okay, Lily, would you like to hand over?
Of course, yeah. Is this what? Yeah. Thanks, everyone, so much for joining us. I was super excited to be asked to do this panel because, honestly, it's the only reason I'm in Glasgow right now is to try and amplify Indigenous voices. When I wrote the book that she mentioned, Who Cares Wins, I looked at lots of different climate solutions from business and technology and politics, and then towards the end of the book looked more at like Indigenous wisdom, Indigenous cultures, and what we can learn, and the kind of deeper maybe value shifts that need to happen. And hand on heart, that's where I hold most hope for real change to happen. And it's been so inspiring, this COP, to see how many Indigenous people are here. And I was on the march earlier as well, and very serendipitously found myself amongst different Indigenous groups that were marching. And it was so heartwarming and moving to see that their presence and their words shared, because there are so many important messages we need to hear from Indigenous voices right now. And I think it's really generous, if I'm honest, given the history that countries like England and the UK have had, the relationship historically that these countries have had with Indigenous cultures. I think it's incredibly generous that so many Indigenous leaders are, and it, I guess, speaks of the urgency that they are now reaching out to us and saying, you need our help, you need to listen, and here's what we can teach you. Or at least that's my impression of it. So I'm delighted to invite everyone on the panel tonight. I will have to rush off. I'll open out some of the questions and keep an eye on time, and then I'll slip out. So Dulma Clark is going to take over from me when I leave. Dulma is from Siberia and is the head of the Live Barefoot Fund, and I think a big part of this whole event that we're seeing this week. We have Jean-Luc Piret, who's a member of the Tunica, I don't want to get this wrong, Tunica Biloxi tribe of Louisiana, and he's also the president of the North American Indian Center of Boston. Sitting to his left, we have Veronica Nmunda, who's a Quechua youth leader from the Ecuadorian Amazon, and is the leader of youth sports and culture for the Confederation of Indigenous Nationalities of the Ecuadorian Amazon. To her left, who's helping translate as well, is Atosha Sultani, the Director of Global Strategy for the Amazon Sacred Headwaters Initiative and the President of Amazon Watch. And last but not least, actually a friend of mine, Christian Vanazet, who's from Tahiti, French Polynesia, and has an amazing non-profit that he can tell you about called makesense.org. So maybe to open it out to begin, I would love to hear from each of you, and we obviously keep it brief because we've got a big panel, but why you're here and maybe some kind of insight into the kind of I guess the learnings from your community and the indigenous voices that you are connected to and represent, that you feel like people in COP and the kind of developed world would really benefit from knowing about and maybe even being inspired by.
Thank you, Lily. Is it working? Hi, thank you so much. My name is Dolma Clark. I'm coming here originally from Siberian Russia, from the shores of Lake Baikal. I hope you heard about that lake before. It's the deepest lake in the world, contains over 20% of the fresh world water, so it's an extremely unique, sacred place for us. And I was born and raised in a very small gathering, like self-subsistent farming community of less than 500 people. And I was privileged enough to study and learn and see the world, and I ended up here in the West. And to be honest, this week was very profound for me. I actually never sort of, I don't know, I'm like really nervous, apologies. I actually never embraced my roots, and I always, I was professionally trained as a human rights lawyer and been in the environmental space for a while, and here we today presenting to the world our solution, how we can clean up the footwear industry. But there was this kind of big, profound change in my mindset where I kind of have come to the conclusion that in the West, or where I am right now, there always has been some sort of weird tunnel vision, all this like separation of things. We need the intersectional sort of, there is a whole interdependence, and we need to kind of move beyond and create this holistic worldview. And I think that's kind of this is when listening to the indigenous voices is extremely, extremely important right now at this present moment. And we've been privileged to work with communities all around the world. And my best time in my life was in the Kalahari Desert with the San community, learning, preserving how to make the traditional hunting sandal. So that I'll stop there for now. Thank you.
So my name is Jean-Luc Perit. I'm originally from New Orleans. I'm a member of the Tunica Biloxi tribe of Louisiana and live and work in Boston. My road to COP26 actually started in 2005 when my family was displaced due to Hurricane Katrina. We lost our home, and my family had to move further inland to our traditional homelands in the center part of the state. 16 years to the day this year, our community was hit again by Hurricane Ida. I have a family in cities such as Norco, in Montague, Louisiana, that were in the path of this, not a water event, but it was the wind event that happened to destroy homes and take roofs off of homes and actually leave our communities that much more vulnerable to the COVID-19 pandemic. So I think about all of that. I think about like all of the stories back home that I'm carrying with me. And also I'm here to listen to the stories of other communities. I'm here to learn from the women that are here. I'm here to learn from the children that are here that have traveled very far from their homes with a heaviness in their hearts to tell the stories of their communities. I even think about all of the children that our communities have lost due to the residential and boarding schools because they were just trying to live the lives that they were taught at home. And so I think about all of those future generations, and I am just here to learn, I am here to connect, and I am here to love all of the people here, all of the indigenous peoples here, and form a bond so that we can go forward working together.
Alituta, Hatun Runaguna, Kariwarmi. En mi idioma he saludado a todos, hombres y mujeres, jóvenes, acá. Yo vengo de la selva ecuatoriana. Vengo donde mi jaguar está libre. Vengo donde mi agua es limpia. Vengo a decir las voces de mis animales y de mi selva y de mi gente que estamos ahí en peligro.
So she greeted you all in her language, Quechua language. Veronica and Munda, I am from the Quechua people of the Ecuadorian Amazon. I come from the land where the jaguars are free and the rivers are free, and that I come here representing the voice of all the creatures of the forest, all of the living things, the animals, the trees.
Me siento muy feliz
I feel very happy
porque no estoy sola.
because I'm not alone.
Estoy con ustedes.
I'm with all of you.
En todos los países han muerto hombres, mujeres, jóvenes, quienes estamos luchando por la verdadera lucha que es nuestro planeta, porque ella es nuestra madre, y mi casa están destruyendo, por eso estoy aquí.
In many parts of the world, men, women, youth, young people are being killed for defending their house, for defending their homes, for defending Mother Earth, our planet. And that's why I'm here, defending my home.
Y agradecer a cada uno de ustedes porque ustedes son un espíritu que están acá, un espíritu de nuestra madre tierra. Yo soy indígena, tal vez serás blanco, negro, pero todos somos hijos de nuestra Pachamama. Y por eso estoy muy feliz aquí. Y que se escuchen las voces de los jóvenes y niños.
I'm here just like all of you are here. You are here having heard the voice of the earth herself. And that we are here to bring the voice of the earth to the world, listening to youth especially, listening to the children, listening to the future generations.
Y para que entiendan mi mensaje, visiten la Amazonía. Ahí hay un mundo muy mágico, donde hay flora y fauna y animales y nosotros, culturas vivas. Gracias, estoy muy feliz de estar aquí compartiendo con todos ustedes. Pagracho.
And my home, the Amazon, is this magical realm full of species, full of creatures, full of animals and life. And that's why I bring to you. I bring their voices, and I'm glad to share this place with you. And thank you for having me. It's great to be here, a great honor. I have been on this journey for 30 years now, working to protect the Amazon, and it's a humbling journey. I'm constantly inspired, and I'm constantly learning from the wisdom of indigenous peoples who don't see any separation between themselves and the forest. They are the forest, and have taught me to think in this and dream the reality into existence in this holistic way. And I'm sorry we're late tonight because we were on our way here. I'll just take in 1 second to tell you the story with another indigenous leader, the Warani from the Yasuni area. And we ran into the Minister of Environment of Ecuador. And there was an interesting conversation that had to happen. And we were both in tears because she was talking about the isolated peoples, the uncontacted peoples, her own people, the Warani, in the most biodiverse place on earth, being threatened by oil drilling. What would amount to just a few weeks maybe of oil for the world would be destroying the most biodiverse place on earth. And she really wanted the minister to feel and sense into what was at stake. And we stayed, let that unravel or unfurl. And that's why we're late. But it's great to be here, and I look forward to sharing more with you through the night.
So hello everyone, my name is Christian. I come from Tahiti, French Polynesia. Do you know where it is? Yeah. It's really a small island in the middle of nowhere. There's around 250,000 of us. When I was growing up, my grandfather was a politician there, and he passed the law that allowed us to have social security and retirement, which was at the moment the main challenge of the islands. But right now, the world got a bit more complicated. You all know about climate change and the effect it has on small islands like ours. The main sign you see today is when you go in the lagoons, you have a lot of corals that used to be like full of colors and full of fish, and now they're bleaching white. That's the first sign of climate change. And it's something that's really hurtful because you just see the difference in only 20 years. I have a little boy, his name is Leo, 4 years old, and sometimes I think, like, will he be able to see the same corals and lagoon that I've seen? And the problem when you're from Tahiti is that there's little you can do about climate change from there. It's really in the middle of nowhere. We're only 200,000, little emissions. And so the goal, like when you try to work on this issue, is how do you get people all across the world to act in their cities at their own level? 70% carbon emissions come from cities. And so using like the internet, and at that time was Facebook, and then we built our own platform, we tried to rally volunteers across the world to launch grassroots initiatives which can have an impact on climate. And if there's one story that's the same as you shared, is that when you are born in islands like ours, you feel one with nature. You don't see the ocean or the mountains as something different than you, but you're in it all the time. And this is something I would love everyone to experience, because I think, as you said, that's the first thing to start to care about our planet, because it's also about caring about ourselves. Thank you.
I'm going to leave now because I have to. I don't want to. I have to. It was so beautiful to get a little glimpse into you yourselves and your work. And I just wanted to say I'd love to hear more. And if there's anything I can do to support you with what you're doing, there's an open invitation. The people who organize this event know how to reach me. And I also want to throw that to the audience too. Hello. That for anyone in the room and also watching, we need to amplify Indigenous voices. And if there's any way in your work and your life you can find a way to do that, I'd really call upon you to help with that effort. Thank you.
Thank you, Lily. So I can see the clock, we've got only 12 minutes left, and I'm just struggling which questions to ask because I prepared like 10. So honestly, from my personal experience, what I saw during COP, I like the indigenous voices, I believe were heard, but then in general, how moving forward we can create a better way of collaborating, and any thoughts around that would be great, and then hopefully I can ask the second question later. Thank you.
In November 2019, I took part in the Dred Scott reenactment of the slave rebellion, 1811 German Coast Uprising outside of New Orleans. The landscape from 1811 to 2019 changed ever so slightly, because even though the plantations are still there in Louisiana, the landscape also now houses oil refineries. And so I'm there in an indigenous contingent, walking shoulder to shoulder with our black brothers and sisters. And we were chanting, Liberté, we're going to end slavery. And while we were saying the words of our ancestors, we were peppered by residue from the oil refineries. And so we were saying things, but what were we really saying? What was the slavery that we were out to end in that moment? And so I think about all of that, and I think about not just, let's also be very clear when we talk about nature and connecting to nature, because we have spent centuries litigating the personhood of fellow humans. And now we are getting to the point where we're recognizing the rights of nature. And that is not going to end in a reciprocal relationship if we're continuing these extractive systems. And so we need to end slavery. We need to end all of this. And part of it, yes, is connecting with nature, but we also have to connect with our ancestors who are buried in these grounds.
Thank you.
Mi visión y mi sueño es que cambiemos nuestra vida primero por nosotros, porque si nosotros no estamos bien con nosotros mismos, nada va a cambiar.
So my vision for the future is that we begin by healing ourselves, to work within ourselves, because if we don't transform our inner being, it's hard to change the outer world.
Nosotros en mi comunidad estamos en armonía con el árbol, con la laguna, con el viento. Todo nos conecta.
In my community, we are in harmony. We're in harmony with everything, with the wind, with the forest, with the river, with the air.
Yo he venido acá para que los discursos de los grandes líderes de los grandes países y potencias mundiales, esos discursos que ellos dicen, es muchas veces mentira.
I've come here to bear witness to how many of our political leaders are here giving rhetorical speeches, but much of what they're saying are lies.
Mi abuelo me decía que nosotros, los pueblos, las personas, mi pueblo era de palabra, no necesitábamos nada escrito, mi palabra valía más que un papel.
My grandmother would say that our people are people of our word, that we don't need treaties or we don't need to sign contracts. Our word rules, our word is the contract.
Y hacer el pacto con nuestro mundo, porque solo somos pasajeros. Hoy estamos aquí como un sueño, hoy estoy acá, hoy están ustedes, pero hoy hagamos ese cambio. Les invito a hacer un cambio de conciencia, porque nuestro mundo se está acabando.
So the same way, I think we need to give our word to the world, our word to the earth, and to change our consciousness ourselves, to start with changing our own consciousness. And that's what the world needs of us right now.
Estoy aquí.
Otherwise we won't have a future.
Estoy aquí porque hice una promesa a mis ancestros y a mi hijo que se llama Nanki, es una lanza. Él me dijo, mami, regresa con noticias buenas. Ya no queremos petroleras, mineras, y el gobierno en mi país está acabando con los pueblos indígenas. Por eso estoy triste.
So I came here with a promise to my 4-year-old Nanki, which is the word for spear. He said, Mama, come back with some good things. Because for me, I'm sad. I'm feeling a lot of sadness because my people are being threatened, our rivers, our forests is being decimated, and our government is trying to destroy our lands.
Por eso pido a ustedes, comprométanse donde ustedes vivan, así sea en un cuarto, pero si hacemos conciencia, todo cambiará.
So that's why I ask each of you to make a commitment to the place you're from. It can be a small part of the world, but make a commitment to defend that place. And if not, life will end on this planet.
Y si han perdido la cultura del amor, recuperémonos.
And if we've lost the culture of love, let's reclaim the culture of love.
Porque es el único camino para salvar el planeta.
Because it's the only way of protecting the planet.
Y sí, estoy un poco acá triste porque mi abuelo murió con cáncer y yo ya no quiero callar más.
I'm a little bit sad because my grandfather died of cancer and I don't want to be quiet about it anymore.
Por eso los pueblos indígenas estamos acá. Somos el pulmón del mundo y ahí está nuestra biodiversidad, donde vivían los dinosaurios y a ellos el planeta les acabó. Y si no hacemos ese cambio de conciencias en cada uno de nosotros, tal vez de aquí saldrá un presidente, algo en sus pueblos, pero desde el momento que asuman con responsabilidad y con amor, porque tu hijo y mi hijo viven aquí.
And so that's why I'm here to defend the land that we're a part of. I am the lungs of the earth. Our forests are the lungs of the earth. And that just like the dinosaurs once went extinct in those lands, that's what we're facing now. And that's why leaders who are leaders today have to comply with the higher calling. They have to protect the planet. They have to be people of their world. They have to operate from love in their hearts and their commitments of their word.
Me gustó conocer su país, pero es mi primera vez que estoy acá. Cuando regrese, tal vez mi hijo vuelva acá y quisiera ver una sábana verde acá también.
So it's my first time visiting your beautiful country, and I'm going to come back sometime and bring my 4-year-old, and maybe when he comes back, we could see, just like my country, that there is a green forest all across this land.
Estoy muy agradecida. Estoy muy feliz de estar acá.
I'm very happy to be here. I'm just gonna pass. I feel like no, really. I feel like she said so much. I just say one thing. There's so much that can be done, and just like nature, we must self-organize to create conditions conducive to more life. That's what nature does. That's what we can learn from. And I invite you to check out sacredheadwaters.org and amazonwatch.org and learn about their amazing visionary effort to permanently protect 35 million hectares in the headwaters of the Amazon, the Sacred Headwaters Initiative. And you can be a part of this journey with us. Thank you.
I'm going to ask you a question.
Just on the collaboration, like there's a few companies that are polluting, and maybe like for me it's personal because like it's going underwater and all of that. But like all these oil companies, they are global and they collaborate with every government on Earth. And the problem is that we as citizens don't collaborate enough across border to fight those guys. So there's no oil in Tahiti, but oil is one of the reasons the water is going down. But if you look at it, when you try to stop an oil company, we have a campaign running against Total. It's a French oil company. And if you want to make them stop a pipeline, you have to put pressure on banks in France. But then if banks in France refuse to finance it, there's going to be a bank in Japan financing it. So then you have to connect with activists in Japan. And so what you are saying about the collaboration is that every one of us is connected to nature. It's to find our purpose. But then we're on the same team to fight the climate change. And we can't just trust our government because when it's about your home, I mean, you can just trust yourself and your team. And so what I'm going to ask is just like more collaboration between activists. Tomorrow, for example, at the People's Summit, there's a session especially against Total, where organizations from 8 countries come together to find how do we collaborate against these big giants that have no borders. So that's on the collaboration.
Thank you, Christian. Thank you so much. It's been an honor to be on the same stage with you all. We've got 30 seconds left. I'm just going to provide, I think there's questions, 10-minute questions or no? can't see anyone, the organizers, sorry. But I would like to close on a very simple remark, and it's gonna sound slightly biased since I'm here with our family social business making shoes. But from our side and from my personal side, the sort of simplest way to reconnect to nature, if you haven't done it so, just take your shoes off and feel the ground. Your feet are amazing, amazing organ that's like so under. It deserves a lot of attention. It has like 200,000 nervous cells ending, and just connect to the ground, keep yourself centered, just reconnect with nature from the ground up. Thank you so much.
Thank you for an incredible panel. Thank you, Dulma. Thank you, Jean-Luc. Thank you, Veronica. Thank you, Atosa. Thank you, Christian. I'd like to now call up the next section. Galahad Clark, who's the Chief Ecosystem Officer of Vivobarefoot, will be moderating this panel, including Gwilym Pugh. Would you like to join us? And Kay Michael. Yeah, just go there. Galahad. Kay. We're looking for Kay Michael. While we're waiting for Kay to join us, we'd like to show a little video that we have made for our vision of how footwear could take the very best of indigenous wisdom and match it to the modern technology to create a new vision for how sustainable regenerative footwear might be. So we'll show the video and then over to Galahad.
Okay, thank you. Hello. Hello, thank you, and what a incredibly moving panel and words and people that was. So we just need to shake it out. So I'm just going to ask you all to stand up, take off your shoes to follow up on what Dulma said. Take them off, stand up, everybody stand up, all of you stand up, take off your shoes. All of you, come on, stand up, take off your shoes. We are one people standing on one earth, connected by 2 feet. Through our feet, we can feel climate change. Shake it out. You can leave your shoes on. Take your shoes off, stand up, shake it out. This panel is about health. And how, as was said on the previous panel, human health is deeply connected to planetary health. And we've got 3 really extraordinary panelists here today. And our goal is to leave you healthier in half an hour than you are now. We're all at the sort of end of the first week of COP. I'm definitely a lot less healthy than I was a week ago. And I hope we can just help restore your health a little bit. There's a hell of a job to be done, as we just heard. And so hopefully by restoring some of your health, we can give you the energy to go forth into the second week. We've got physical, transformational, natural health journey to talk about. We've got mental health and eco-anxiety, and then of course nature and the intersection of public health to talk about with these incredible people. So I'm just going to let them introduce themselves. Just feel free to shake it out, move your toes, stay standing up, because Gwym is going to go first, and then just introduce yourselves, and then each of them are going to take you on a little health journey.
All right, so I'm
Gwilym, yeah.
I'm feeling a strong amount of imposter syndrome, especially after the last speakers, because honestly, I don't feel like I deserve to be here in that presence and with that message. So yeah, that was absolutely incredible to witness and to hear, and I'm sure that's going to continue through on the next week. But I grew up in Wales and I live in London now. My background was in consumer finance in a very generic, go to school, get a job, sit in an office and sit down on your ass all day and, not really move. And long story short, that led me to hit rock bottom physically and mentally. I was 7-8 stone heavier than I am now at a 47-inch waist. I had knee problems, hip problems, feet problems, and everything felt like a roadblock, and I couldn't move. And it was actually that rock bottom that helped. I've been trying to think of this earlier, but the opposite of a vicious circle. So I was going through a vicious circle, and I felt like that vicious circle ground to a halt, and then it started to unwind a little bit. And it started to unwind when I stood up, and I stopped trying to chase all these health influences and health goals and workouts, and I just started to move, and I started to walk. And walking is the one thing which has saved my future life that I didn't see a future in at that point. So from there, I started moving more. I was a lot more healthy. I lost a lot of weight, which was a byproduct of that, and I ended up having some opportunities to model and fell into social media. And bringing it back to the environment, it was the social media work that enabled me to travel and witness the majesty of the planet and the natural world. And it's been the natural world which has kept me wanting to remain healthy and wanting to be physically healthy and never feel like I can't do anything from there. So it's been the planet and the natural world that has unwound that vicious circle and brought me back through here. And that's all come from walking, and that's essentially all come from my feet. So it's pretty poignant that I'm here now. And that's a very short version of my very long story.
Gwym's going to get you moving in a minute, so get ready to move. Let's go Days next, and then Kay. Just a brief introduction, and then you're going to do your thing after.
Okay. I'm so sorry, but I'm neurodiverse, so if everyone can simmer down so I can actually figure out what I'm going to say. Thank you. So I'm Daisy Gargi, and I'm a climate justice activist. My background is in activism, but also I worked at Extinction Rebellion as a regenerative culture coordinator. And what this means is essentially we are finding new ways to live with one another in order to change the relationship with ourselves, to each other, but then in turn to the earth. This is something that's particularly quite close to my heart because I recognize that it was when we started to learn how to use and abuse one another is when we started to see the beginnings of ecological breakdown, and even in this country, we have for me, the starting point was the theft of our land from the commoners that happened in the enclosures, then turned capitalism, then colonialism, and then now we found ourselves in this big mess of where we've like basically treated each other like shit. We tried to do it to the earth, and the earth is fighting back. So the way that we need to solve the climate crisis is by coming together as community, one, doing the inner work on ourselves and figuring out what part within this toxic system do we play and how do we change this. Then moving into how can I be a better person within my communities, and how can I take that same feeling of love, duty and care to the earth. And I think something about this is finding connection to our land. I was quite lucky to partly grow up in Lincolnshire, where I learnt how to love England, especially with someone who comes from a very complicated background of my family being only here due to colonialism, and being from the Niger Delta region, of where we experience lots of problems with oil companies like Shell. Yes. So there is something about coming to a land that's not meant to be yours, but finding place within it. And I think everyone should have that moment to find true ways to connect to our land.
Yeah, that brings me nicely to Letters to the Earth. So my name's Kay. I'm a theatre maker and co-founder of Letters to the Earth, and met Days on the streets in activism a few years back. And so the invitation with Letters to the Earth began in January, February 2019. It was a moment, I'm sure many of you remember, when youth strikers were out on the street. XR had caused an existential crisis for many, and we felt that people needed to share their responses to the climate and nature crisis. What we didn't quite realise what would follow was a huge outpouring of grief. Within 1 month, we had up to 1,000 letters in our inbox, which we just could not have foreseen. And these were letters of love, of loss, of hope and of action, from 3-year-olds through to great-grandparents, to teachers, to climate scientists, to artists, journalists, indigenous leaders all around the world. And it was quite overwhelming to receive. There was just a team of 4 of us reading all of these letters and just being brought to tears pretty much every day. We felt that what was apparent is that people needed that opportunity to express what was being felt in that moment. And for many, what was being heard for the first time was the cries of the earth. And actually, there's so much that was said on this in the previous panel, but the voices of the earth and the grief of the earth coming through us, the human voice, and needing to be said. And in that process, actually it being quite a medicinal process, quite a transformative process, and coming back to ourselves as well in that process of going, this is how I feel. And in that, then connecting with others who may feel similarly. And it's been such a story of community and of belonging, not just to each other, but reconnecting with the earth through that felt experience, and discovering a pathway or a journey towards action. You know, it is these feelings are so welcome and so natural. Of course we feel grief, of course we feel sorrow at what's happening to the state of the planet. We need to express that, we need to release it, and in doing so, we do find the strength and the courage to step forwards into action with each other in that place of interconnectedness. So that's a little bit about that project. And thank you for getting our shoes off. I really appreciate that.
So these extraordinary people are now going to just take you on a little journey. It's going to start high energy and end up in a moment of calm. So starting with Grill.
All right, first of all, no one told anyone to sit down again. So everyone get up. Come on, get up, get up, get up, get up, get up, get up. All right, if you can. Right, now, what you said is going to start active, but what I want to do is start a little bit calm, and I want you to stand up, close your eyes, and think about your feet. Think about how your feet feel. Now, scientifically, there's a line of communication through your body joined by the muscle fascia, which goes from your feet all the way up through your body, through the spiral lines. So the movement is spiraling through your body. And that's faster. That communication is faster than you thinking about your feet and then that going back from your brain back down to your feet. Okay, so you're thinking about your feet. Now, you got a tripod from your fifth toe to your first toe to your heel. Think about that and think where your weight is. So you're scanning how you feel on your feet. Now, this is how you should feel all the time when you're standing up. A lot of the time in shoes, the weight is distributed to the middle of the forefoot. And that's unbalanced. That hits your knee, that hits your hip, that hits your shoulders. So now you got the tripod, you've got your feet spread. If you can do this, pull your big toe and your little toe out to the side, if you can do it. Now, shift your weight over your right foot. Right or left, your dominant foot, whatever. And go onto your toes of your left. And you feel balance. You feel balance in that position. And now move from the bottom of your right foot all the way up to your left shoulder. So you can open your eyes if you want at this point. It's going to get a little bit difficult if you can't see what I'm doing. So you go right down onto your right foot and move up through your left shoulder. And feel how that's joined from across your body. Now, as that goes down, you go down to your left side. So you go up and then down. And then you go up and then down. And this is the infinite motion of the body. A lot of exercises that we do at the gym are A to B. You're pushing, and you're going from start to finish. When you start to move your body, which essentially is like an over-exaggerated walk, you feel like you're transferring your weight from one side to the other, and you've got free energy. You're not feeling. And look around the room. Look how cool everyone looks. There we go. We got someone dancing. Woo! All right. So, we're running out of time. I could have carried on for a little bit then. But what I just wanted to do is demonstrate how your body is interconnected from your feet and how that motion from your feet connects way up through your body before it even hits your brain. And having your feet, your bare feet, touching the ground enables that. Here we go.
Yeah, I think that was quite fun because there's something within us that loves play. And I do lots of workshops where I teach people how to connect back to nature. I work at a local nature reserve, and I get adults to roll around in mud a lot of the time. Yes, so that reminded me so much of the play. But what I would actually like to do is kind of take us through a meditation to kind of ground us, especially with it being COP and that being the reason why most of us are here. We have to remember, why do we do this work? So I'm going to invite everyone to sit down. Everyone can sit down. And I'm going to ask everyone to be quiet again. As you know, I like the silence. So I invite everyone to close your eyes. And then I think everyone needs to take a deep breath in. And I want you to feel the deep breath in your stomach. So if you feel comfortable, you can put your hand on your stomach as you breathe in. Because a lot of people, when they think about taking deep breaths, they take it from the top of their lungs, and this could actually induce more anxiety than what we're trying to do. So I want you to take deep breath from your stomach, and then we're going to take a clearing breath. So when you breathe out, you're going to go, okay. And then let's try that again. Breathe in, and then go, one more time, breathe in. Yeah. So now I would like you guys, eyes closed. Come on, guys. I'd like you guys to think about the first time you remember connecting with nature. This could be any time. I remember my first time. It was the moment that I felt that I needed to protect a tree that stood outside of my mum's home. And I'm sure everyone has a story like that. Think about the feelings you felt. Did you feel connected to land, to soil, to water, to air? Did it bring you joy? Did it remind you of a place of home, of a place of safety? And when you're thinking about the first time you've connected to nature, I want you to move on to the first time that you realized you loved nature. The first time where you felt the unconditional love that our planet gives to us, even when we may not deserve it. The fact that she provides for us in many different ways. The fact that she nourishes us. And then I would like you to take you to the last time you remember connecting with nature. What was this for you? Was this a walk in your local park? Was this a stroll along the beach? And think about the feelings that it brought you. And when we think about these feelings, we have to remember that within this time, within this moment of crisis, both for our planet and many other issues, we need to find calm and safety. And I always say the first thing that happened when we hit the pandemic is everyone bought a houseplant because we know where we need to be. We know we need to connect with nature. And in the same breath, I would like to read you guys a little statement. It's called a solemn intention statement. And in many activist circles, it's used to ground ourselves in purpose for the work that we plan to do. And hopefully does the same for the work that you're planning to do here at COP. So let's take a moment, this moment, to consider why we're here. Let's remember our love for this beautiful planet that feeds, nourishes, and sustains us. Let's remember our love for the whole of humanity in all corners of the world. Let's recollect our sincere desire to protect all of this for ourselves, for all living beings, and for generations to come. And as we act today, may we find the courage to bring a sense of peace, of love, and appreciation to everyone we encounter, to every word we speak, and to every action we make. We are here for all of us. And then in the same moment, I'll invite you to take another deep breath to end our meditation on. So inhale, and then exhale. Thank you guys for joining. And remember, we are all here rooted in love, rooted in care, rooted in duty, and let that be the intent for all the actions that you're planning to do over this next week.
It's quite hard to follow that. Thank you, Days. I'm just feeling really, we so need this. And I think more so in the kind of circus that is COP, right? We're all here to make change, and are we embodying the best of ourselves, the love, the light, the care that is needed so as to make those changes? So thank you for bringing that. It's so important. Thank you. And I can see a clock here. There's 3.5 minutes. So I'm just thinking about how to use this time. First of all, I'll say that there's lots of envelopes scattered around the room. And in those envelopes, they are all for you. You each have one. And inside those envelopes is a letter written from someone around the world just for you. We've received so many, and they bring us right back to the heart and right back to the reason why we're here. And there's the invitation for you to write and share your own as well, and to find spaces to read them to others, whether that's panels like this, just to really disrupt the space and bring us back to the heart, or to send those letters to someone, to share them on social media. We're Letters to the Earth on Instagram and Letters to Earth on Twitter. On that, you'll see a whole story of many people's letters. And there's many letters also in this book. I'm not plugging. The reason I'm saying all of this is because I could choose to read so many right now. And actually, I'm going to read one for you that's not in our book. It's a letter that has been wanting to find its place, and I really feel like its place is now. It's been sent to me by a dear friend and elder called Azul Tome. And it feels right to end on this because we are sat on the River Clyde. And I think that's just, so Days and yourself, I'm sorry I've forgotten your name. Gwel. I'm so sorry, Gwel. Gwel and Days have so beautifully reconnected us to our body and to our heart. And I want to reconnect us to the river that we are sat on right now. And this river has been flowing for years. And it runs for, I looked this up, 110 miles, I think. And for 14,000 years, there's been settlements along its banks. So this river is a river of time. And there's so much, I had a bath this morning, which is my self-care. And the water releases a lot, it cleanses a lot. And so I want to read something whilst we remember our place on this river. This is a message of water, which was given to Azul Tome on the 2nd of December 2016 by the River Dart in Devon in the UK. After Azul fell on her knees asking the river how to love when there is so much loss. And this is what the waters said back to her. My dear child, do not worry about me, water. I recover quickly with the song of our birds, the love of trees, with movement, moments of rest, and the prayers moving around our earth. I regain balance with your heartfelt tears, your remembered songs added to the ones of so many now. Do not focus your energy on saving me. Something way more profound is taking place right now. Listen and observe. All of us, soil, water, plants, air, animals, and all ancestors are calling you humans to us so that we can save your species. We know and have known for a while that you do not have much time left if you do not wake up to your birthright, your belonging to Earth, and come home real soon, real soon. We keep dying. We keep giving away our lives to shake you up from a deep and very long amnesia. Once you can allow the truth and quality of such love to permeate through your traumatized being and desolate soul, you will wake up from a lifetime of anesthesia to your immense grief and capacity for love. When you create containers of sacred beauty that opens your heart to what love truly is, then you will realize with a massive sob that you were loved all along, always have, and forever by all of us who you think you are saving. You have 5 years as a species to wake up, mature, and remember in your bones that you belong to life. That was written 5 years ago. Thank you.
Thank you all. Thank you all. We are the ones we've been waiting for.
Thank you, everyone. Please stay with us. That was incredibly powerful. Thank you, Kay. Thank you, Days. Thank you, Gwilym. Thank you, Galahad. The time's now. As we get our grounding again from that beautiful, beautiful letter, we'll introduce you now to the third chapter of our evening. Once we've reconnected, we need to restore, which is get our energy back and ground. And now our next topic is regenerate. If we can't regenerate, this is what we have in us. We've got an ability to restore and regenerate. And this next panel is looking at what COP seek to do the most, is find businesses that will help restore and regenerate our planet. And everyone criticizes COP for having greenwashing, but there are lots of really good companies out there that are doing the real thing, and they're very sincere about it. And I'm really proud to be able to introduce our panelists now. Dulma Clark, who you met earlier, will be moderating. We'll be joined by Brittany Kaiser. Brittany's best known from her book Targeted and for being the whistleblower for the Cambridge Analytica scandal. She blew the whistle on what was happening with digital and what was happening with Facebook. And there was a film about her called The Great Hack. And she's now a digital rights activist. But why she's on this panel today is because she's chair of the first 100% renewable energy crypto mining company called Griffin Mining. And then we're also joined by Katie Hoffman. Katie is a venture capitalist who has an incredible knack of mobilizing literally trillions of dollars and collaborations across governments and private sector to shift money into ecological investments. And then we're also joined by Rajiv Joshi. And Rajiv is founder and CEO of Bridging Ventures. And he's also the lead author of the Decisive Decade Inquiry into the Future of Climate Action, commissioned by Chief Architect of the Paris Agreement, Christiana Figueres. So over to you, Dulma. Thank you.
Thank you, Joe. Thank you, Joe. Jo has been she's such an incredible human being. She's been mothering our entire team through this crazy COP. And as we heard, it's like a crazy race that's happening, and I'm bamboozled myself. And I've been reading a lot on social media, on the news, all this criticism around greenwashing around COP. So the first question would be, to the entire panel, sort of, what's from your point of view the biggest challenge that the business is facing? You can pick up any, obviously based on your experience, and then what would be sort of one main solution that kind of could respond to the challenge? Yeah, thank you.
Of course, yeah, happy to start with saying that I believe that a lot of businesses believe that their biggest challenge is to try to offset the negative impact that they're already having on the environment. Instead of starting with a strategy of how can I run my business in a way that doesn't have negative impact in the first place. So I really feel like I was privileged to start my business just over a year ago, where we decided to start with the environment and designing around how to never have a negative impact from the very beginning. So as you've probably seen, a lot of the world's largest and most valuable companies, worth trillions of dollars each, if not hundreds of billions each, are technology companies that are driven by data. And so what drives those companies is large-scale infrastructure around the world, large data centers that are processing massive amounts of our personal information. Now, I think a lot of people saw everyone from Elon Musk to Jack Dorsey to the Winklevoss twins and Kevin O'Leary this past year start to bring up the fact that companies that use data centers are probably taking up more energy than a lot of countries individually. But these companies are not making a move to have large-scale investment in renewable energy. Now, my question there is why? how does that make any sense that you could decide when you have hundreds of billions or trillions of dollars to continue to use fossil fuels to drive your business? For me, that made no sense whatsoever. So the first technology company that I ever decided to actually join, as opposed to just being an advisor, being an activist on the sidelines, I only joined a company when they came to me and said, hey, our plan is to invest billions of dollars into large-scale 100% renewable facilities around the world and to become a partner to governments in order to achieve their climate goals. And that's when I said, okay, well, for the first time, this actually sounds convincing, where a large technology company could have a positive impact, not just sitting around thinking about, oh, how do we offset the negative carbon emissions that we are already creating? So to start from the beginning is not something that every company actually has the privilege to do, of course. But instead of thinking, okay, we have this amount of emissions, how do we offset it? We need to actually be designing from the start of how never to have emissions in the first place. It is actually completely financially viable, if not even better for your company's bottom line, to invest in large-scale renewables and never to be using fossil fuels in your business. Most governments around the world now actually have renewable incentive structures where for me to use electricity on my 100% hydro or solar or geothermal or wind-based power centers where data centers are running, sometimes it actually costs negative. I'm paid by the government in order to develop and use those energy facilities. So I really think that it just takes a stronger commitment from executives to say we refuse to ever have these types of emissions in the first place. And that's where I really think, yes, there's a problem, quote unquote, that businesses face, but I really think that it's a denial in the first place because you can do better and that can be good for your business.
Thank you, Brittany. Katie?
I really appreciate what you just said, especially on the kind of front end, which is emissions, right? So that's what's in the atmosphere, and that's what a lot of folks are gathering around net zero. So a lot of the challenges that we're hearing in the media and from our friends at home, because all of us are probably from a different home, but bless those who have welcomed us into their home. It's about net zero, and no one knows how to define net zero. So it's emission reduction standards, it's CO2e, it's what have you. My big response to this question is, if we really want to regenerate planetary resources, we need to be looking soup to nuts at supply chains and materiality. Materiality is huge, and it is about emissions and CO2e, but it's also benchmarking that to toxicity waste. And as Bill McDonough would say, waste is a design problem. So I actually think that we can join forces, indeed, with how we move the sector forward, especially in technology, but also in apparel, in consumer goods, in agriculture. There's so much to be done on supply chains, and I hope that can be a conversation that we can push forward here, all of us, right? And make sure that we get messages out that are about materiality. And I think that's the most I'll say.
Thank you, Katie.
We have 4 gigatons of CO2 to burn by the end of this decade for a 60% chance of hitting 1.5. So it really is the decisive decade, no doubt. And right now, governments are arguing over a few technical details, which, if we don't get the right side of those technical details, will increase global emissions by 10 to 12 gigatons based on past levels of emissions that either get counted or don't get counted. So what happens in Glasgow really does matter in terms of the carryover credits from previous negotiations. But what we're really talking about here isn't just about the emissions. We can continue to try to look at the plumbing and fix the leaks, but the truth is that we have a broken plumbing system. And here in Scotland, we live in a country where Adam Smith, who was the founding father of economics, created the so-called invisible hand of the market. But before that, wrote a book called The Theory of Moral Sentiments, which in fact was what he was putting forward as the basic of our economic systems. In that, he wrote, how selfish soever a man may be supposed, there are evidently some principles in his character that interest him in the fortunes of others, and render their happiness necessary to him, though he gains nothing from it except the pleasure of seeing it. He effectively said that our economic system should be based upon altruism and love. Now, at that time, it was a pretty radical thing to be saying. I don't see an economic system that's based on love. I heard something earlier at the beginning of this panel from our colleagues in the Amazon, which was talking about that kind of a system. Learning from nature, recognizing that if we look at nature, it's nature's model that is our best example of the kind of economic system we might be able to build. One that is healing, one that is restorative, one that is regenerative. And so I'm glad that you've brought us together, because I think it's companies like Vivo and others that are helping us see that there is a different way forward. There are, for example, fishermen in Jamaica that I met with during COVID who are restoring the coral reefs, replanting mangroves in the coastal areas, using ecosystem-based adaptation, working with blue crab, seagrass. There are whole new ways in which we can play the role that we're meant to play on the planet, which is to love each other and the planet and care for it. And so I think we've got to create a caring economy, and what better time to create a caring economy than when we emerge from this COVID crisis that has decimated so many communities, and where we now need to put care at the very center of all that we do.
Thank you. Thank you, Rajiv. So I've got individual questions for each of the experts on this panel, and I'll start with Brittany. As Homo sapiens, we're not really ready for this fast-paced technological revolution. We're kind of like, our body's not designed for that, our brains are not designed for that, and I would like to hear your thoughts on how we can stay safe and sane in this environment, and any top tips the audience around the world and here could learn from you, how we can survive through this crazy, fast-paced digitalization. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for that. That's actually what I spend a lot of my time doing after becoming a whistleblower on the unethical issues within the technology industry and data industry especially. I've been doing work on everything from digital literacy to fighting disinformation. I think a lot of people this week in COP26 have been talking about the effects of climate disinformation, and that all goes back to the way that social media is designed. It's designed to be addictive. It's designed to sell our time and attention to the highest bidder through advertising platforms. And so I co-founded with my sister, who's back here, the Own Your Data Foundation. And what we do is we teach digital literacy programming. This is now for the first time an IEEE global standard as of this past year, where instead of IQ or EQ, there's a concept called DQ, Digital Intelligence Quotient. And it doesn't just mean what do you understand about your data rights or basic cybersecurity protocols. It's everything from media literacy. So how do you spot fake news and disinformation or hacking and phishing attempts and be able to become a more conscious consumer of digital content, all the way through to screen time management. How do you protect your mental and physical health while, especially over the past year and a half, being forced to lead nearly a completely digital life? Even our children are being forced to lead a completely digital life in order to go to school. And so we're faced with these issues in a way that we never have been before, producing exponentially more data, being subject to exponentially more targeting in these issues. So what I like to always start with is, digital literacy starts with awareness of the problem. When we get all the way to people denying climate change because they have seen too much disinformation on their Facebook newsfeed, there are many steps before that that lead to that becoming a problem. And it starts with us not actually having transparency or consent or control on our experience when we're using technology. So I don't know if I can get a show of hands of how many people here actually read terms and conditions before they download an app. Anybody? Bueller. So most people don't, but if you looked at even just one of the apps that you use every day, you probably will be shocked that you're giving away everything from access to your live location, to the data you're creating in other apps, to the ability for that company to turn on your microphone and your video camera whenever they want, let alone your pictures and your videos and your contacts, et cetera, and so forth. So what does that mean? That means that we need to start becoming aware. If you don't have time to read 40 or 50 pages of legalese, I get it. It's not easy to understand. It's not simple to do it. But you need to actually think about what you're giving away, because some of these apps, the way that they prey on people, the way that they find people that are, for instance, more likely to be convinced of climate change disinformation, is because of the amount of information that you give them access to. So we need to actually start to think about using more privacy by design technologies. I myself am a big advocate and builder of blockchain technologies using advanced forms of encryption. But you can start simple. You can use Signal instead of WhatsApp, which is owned by Mark Zuckerberg. You can decide to use Brave browser, DuckDuckGo, instead of Google Chrome. And this will start to pick away at the vulnerability that unfortunately all of us are subject to. And I think when we're talking about large-scale public engagement in climate activism, that this could not be a more important part of the conversation, because everyone has to be on board. Everyone has to do their own part and has to understand how important that is in order for us to create policy change and large-scale impact. So do start with yourself and start to think about on a daily basis making those small changes.
Thank you, Brittany. Data from the ground up. Thank you. Katie, let's talk about funding.
I got really excited about what she was just saying, because how many people know where their money sleeps? So your credit card, your bank card. Oh, I mean, she was asking questions, right? So, yep, you know your bankers, you know where the money goes. I mean, I didn't, and that's one of the major forces that's driving asset classes that are just moving trillions of dollars into harmful and destructive practices that honestly we're talking about here as if, you know, net zero is a thing. I keep coming back to that, but, you know, banks are talking about how can we not finance things that we already have been financing with all of our money? And it's not just money coming from the top down, it's all of us. Yet the structures are in place where we really do need to understand where our money sleeps. And know your bankers, know where you put your capital. And speaking of digital, this is a big trend that's happening. Where is your capital going? So I think that, gosh, I have so many things that I think, especially in relation to the concepts that you're talking about, but understanding digital currency, and I'm not just talking about Bitcoin, I'm talking about specifically where your capital is, whether that's dollars and cents or pounds or what have you, and knowing the bankers, and the institutional investment paradigm behind that. So when I first got started in doing work on climate, it was working to influence and pass policies around what we call environmental social governance standards at some of the largest institutions in California. So that's over $600 billion that we were able to influence through policy that integrated ESG, and that was right before the Paris Accords. And going into Paris, I was very excited about this, right? Because we had fodder, right? And the same conversations that we're having here today were happening then. The change, though, what I see is all of you here, which is the ground up, how we actually make change from innovation. And why I have moved into venture capital outside of institutional capital is because I believe fundamentally that we have to change where we put investment from the ground up. So venture capital, and you probably know the Silicon man, yeah, every day. But that is a very different culture than the culture that needs to happen, right? The vulture capital to the venture capital, which is really like investing in ground up innovation and regeneration, where companies that need seed funding get it, and sometimes they don't make a return immediately, that's cool, but there's still a way to create an agglomeration within the economy that we can build up and ensure that there is something to grow upon. And that's what gets me excited, and I think we do need to build a bridge between the institutional capital and what these big commitments are and what's happening from the ground up. I think that there is so much growth, and it's regenerative, hopefully, and very, very excited to be a part of, this group and also see companies like Vivo that are doing it, every day and keep plugging supply chains. So all about supply chains.
Thank you, Katie.
I'm really glad that you brought that point up. But did you want to ask a question?
Yes, I would like to ask a question. Rajesh, I didn't even manage to ask my question, but I think we've known each other for a very long time. I think she just read it like, Rajiv, I would like to talk to you about cross-sector collaborations. From your experience, what worked, what didn't work, and what's your sort of advice and how we can move forward? Thank you.
Well, I think I would like to answer your question, but I also want to build on your point. Because I think, when we were putting together the Paris Agreement, many of us mobilized in 2015, and to get to net zero was a big ambition. Even many of the business groups thought we were crazy when the B team was calling for it. Even some of the B team leaders went out, with a little bold ambition. And now, you've got trillions of dollars of capital lining up behind the shift towards a net zero emissions economy, not just the 5.4 trillion that was mobilized when we established the Net Zero Asset Owner Alliance. You've now got 130 trillion being committed by the Glasgow Financial Alliance for Net Zero. However, show me the money is what people are going to be saying when they're standing on the ground looking for those solutions. And I think this question of access to capital is absolutely critical, because we can mobilize trillions and numbers that people have never even heard of, but if people don't see that money, and if they can't access that money, it doesn't make the blind bit of difference to those fishermen in Jamaica or the populations that I see on the ground who are trying to find that little bit of money to regenerate and restore their ecosystems. And so I think we need to definitely fill this gap between the bottom up and the top down, those with resources and those who need access to resources. When it comes to collaboration, I think one of the most critical outcomes, and if you get a chance, I would Google the Decisive Decade report on Oxford University website. It's been put together over the last 2 years with Cristiana Figueres and a whole team of scientists and researchers. One of the things we found was that we need radical collaboration for systems change. And that means everybody has a role to play. We cannot throw stones at each other anymore. We don't have time to throw stones at each other anymore. The Shakers, from Extinction Rebellion to Greenpeace to others, have a critical role to play to raise awareness, highlight what's going on. We saw that in the streets today. Over 100,000 people mobilizing. We need more of that. But we also need technical expertise. We need people who are looking at the data, who are tracking numbers, who are from research institutions. We need them to be resourced to actually model what's going on and understand whether or not it gets us to where we need to get to. We need the private sector to actually come up with solutions. In some ways, markets are the best way to organize economic activity. That's a principle that we know works whether you're in a village in Kenya or whether you're talking about the global stock exchange. We need markets to be regulated. We need markets to be managed in terms of their externalities. And we need to ensure that we deal with inequality, because inequality and climate change are two sides of the same coin. And I think one of the things we're realizing here at this COP is that if we don't deal with that question, there is no way we're going to win in the Decisive Decade. We've got to deal with the fact that less than 2% of the world's population are vaccinated right now in the global south. Many of them can't get here. Many of those voices are not being heard at this COP. This is probably the whitest COP I've ever seen. And I'm speaking as a Scot, and as an Indian, as a Kenyan. But I do think we need to recognize that this is a global agenda, and we need to have the voices of people everywhere shaping that agenda. And that, if we're talking about collaboration, we need real principles to be at the heart of that. That means we need to trust each other, and I think trust is actually eroding quite fast. To build that trust, we need to put together some principles. And I think that it requires us to recognize that civil society's greatest strength is being the detergent that washes away corruption and holds power accountable. And therefore, philanthropy needs to invest in civil society as our highest risk form of capital. We're not seeing that right now. Secondly, it means that the private sector needs to be left alone to do its job, but also supported to do its job without creating negative externalities. And it also means that we need governments that are elected through participatory democratic systems where people get engaged. I mean, if you look at the voter turnout in countries around the world right now, we're seeing elections happening where, I mean, to be honest, this is not a real mandate. People are turning out in less than half of the population, and we're seeing governments elected with a blank check to rule. That falls upon everyone. And so I think your point around consumer activism, citizen engagement, this really is a decisive decade where radical collaboration means every single actor has a role to play. And if we get it right, we can highlight positive examples, we can orchestrate transformation at a global scale, and we can support those on the ground to operationalize that change, from the humanitarian workers to those who are planting trees, to those who are working in schools and in many other parts of our economy. And that's what we need to do rapidly, otherwise we're running out of time.
Thank you. So I just wanted to build on what Katie and Rajiv said and quickly turn into the digital currency. We still have 5 minutes. Do you think the digital currency and the whole digital setup can bridge that gap of how we can access the resources and build up the trust? And yeah, thank you.
For one, I absolutely do. Of course, I'm the executive chairman of a large-scale digital asset production company. But what I have seen, and I really want to touch on a few of the things that you guys said, because I was firstly very emotionally moved that you brought up Adam Smith's earlier work, because I studied at Edinburgh University here, and I remember reading that while I was in Edinburgh when I was a student, studying human rights and political philosophy and international relations, and thinking about what actually heart-centered business looks like. How can you drive economies in a heart-centered way? And what I personally have seen from the blockchain industry is that apart from most of the rest of technologists and entrepreneurs that I've met across different parts of the technology ecosystem, is that it's mostly led by impact-focused, heart-centered people who are building positive social impact technologies and who have designed their companies and their organizations and their distributed autonomous organizations specifically to create a positive impact on the world. And in my business especially, what we have seen is that we have the ability to go past a corporate social responsibility budget, you know, that CSR budget that was supposed to mean that if you were a company and you made profits, that maybe you're going to put a little bit aside for impact. Instead, now we're seeing the rise of ESG, where there are hundreds of billions of dollars of new ESG funds available. And if you are building that heart-centered business that is focused on impact first and foremost, you are right now more likely to get funded in the market than a traditional for-profit only business that does not have any sort of environmental, social, or governance responsibility in the design of your business model. So that is what I have seen to be so incredibly exciting. And to make sure that I answer your question appropriately, for the production of digital assets, which is right now the largest and fastest growing part of the technology industry, this is now a multi-trillion-dollar industry that is completely incentivized on finding the easiest to access energy supply. And right now in most places around the world, that is stranded energy and renewable energy. as governments actually start to make good decisions around incentivizing renewables, it means that the cheapest way to run any sort of business is to use 100% renewable energy. That is something that I feel like is not a big enough conversation, where you can actually run your business more affordably. You can improve your bottom line by using 100% renewables and not having any carbon emissions in your business's operations. That is currently possible all over Europe, in North America, across Latin America, in Africa. It actually shocks me that more people are not talking about this when we have large-scale companies that are investing still in plugging into a mixed grid and using and burning fossil fuels. And to me, that makes no sense at all. So this, in the end, is all about incentive structures. So if you're going to build a heart-centered economy, what we need are incentives for entrepreneurs to do the right thing. And sometimes that has to be top-down with regulation and legislation, meaning that it's illegal to do the wrong thing. But as we've seen, sometimes governments take a long while to move. And so therefore, we need to think about how do we drive these market incentives? How do we make sure that there is more money for people who are doing good than the other way around?
Can I just chime in and say it's also... I just got really excited. It's also, just because I know that we're running out, it's not just incentives, it's also ensuring that we don't disincentivize, we just level the playing field. We're talking about Adam Smith here, just let it go. Right now in the United States, what is it, like 30 million a day that we subsidize for fossil fuels? I mean, that's insane. I don't quote me on that, but it is ridiculous, so look it up. But it is an insane amount of capital, and then the narrative is not about, oh, we're subsidizing fossil fuels. It's about, oh, well, we need to subsidize clean energy, and that's going to be so expensive, and we can't pass these bills around that, and then net zero. And I think that, honestly, we just need to level the playing field. Let's just let the market do what it does, because honestly, clean energy and clean materials and clean supply chains are the best, and they will perform. They will perform better, and they will withstand the test of time, and they consistently have. Yet if you get crushed by government subsidies on the other side, which is ensuring that institutions continue to operate business as usual, we are never going to be able to compete. And that's not actually a free market. That's a fixed market. So we should move in a different direction. I think we all have the ability to influence that.
Thank you. Would you like to?
As long as it's a global level playing field, because we don't want the farmers in Haiti whose crops were ruined by the subsidies in America. These kinds of issues, which is a big challenge when the incentive structures aren't properly put together. So we really do need to have this conversation around incentives and subsidies and taxes, and tax the right things, not the wrong things. But ultimately, I think it's a privilege for us to be here together. I think many people haven't got the privilege to come together and meet in this kind of way, in this kind of surrounding. I think we should continue this conversation. Clearly, the future of economics is a critical part of the conversation about solving the climate crisis. We aren't going to solve this problem only by reducing emissions. There are 8 other planetary boundaries that we're crossing. If you look at the water consumption levels, for example, we're already in the red zone. If you look at methane as a gas, it's 35 times more warming than CO2. If you look at nitrogen levels that are running off in the soils, we're already in the red zone. So we need to change the entire system in so many different dimensions. And we need to move beyond net zero towards a net positive economy that is regenerative. And that really means biomimicry, learning from nature, listening to the indigenous people who started us off. Because ultimately, you may need to go forward go backward in order to go forward. And by that I don't mean we need to go fully into the past, but there's so much wisdom from our ancestors that we've forgotten. I think the process of having intergenerational, intercultural, intersectoral dialogue, sitting together in circles to solve problems together, is something we need to start doing. It can't just happen in isolation and in silos. We now need to do this together, and I'm really glad that this group has started that process. Bridging Ventures and others would love to continue it with you. And thank you, Delma and the team, for putting this together.
Thank you so much.
I just really wanted to thank everyone for coming tonight. It was just a sensational 3 panels. Thank you very much. And Brittany literally dropped everything when we asked her to come. And it's her birthday tonight. And even though it's her birthday, we gate crashed her birthday. So let's sing happy birthday.
Happy birthday to you.
I love you, Joe.
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Brittany. Happy birthday to you.
I love you guys. Thank you so much.
Hi, we have some questions. Some people want to ask questions. Are we allowed to? Do we have a microphone? Do we have a microphone? A spare microphone? Would you like to take this?
Okay, I'm going to be very quick. There's something missing here. Oh, you guys are wonderful speakers, man. Especially you, brother. You actually spoken for me. And there's one thing called movement of people. In Glasgow is a center in UK for asylum seekers and refugees that they don't have identity. Some of them refused, I used to be. And now you got the COVID to register a COVID status, whatever it's called. You need a British passport, you need a fucking ID. Sorry. I'm a comedian, by the way. So how can you jump from movement of people who have no status and you give them 2 injections and they can't go clubbing? They can't come here because they don't have any status, because they don't have no British passport. But you're fighting for other human rights or equal. So I think we are making a mistake here. We should start from the beginning. Where's the problem started? It's the movement of people. What did they move? Ask yourself that question. Do you think I like to be here? I'd love to eat my own food, speak my language. I want my identity, my own country, before climate change. But don't get me wrong, I love the way we are doing, guys. It's cool, but let's don't jump things. There's something very not nice. Glasgow, I think if you're from Glasgow, remember one guy was killed in a hotel because he got mental and whatever happens because he didn't have an ID. We need to fight for identity. You cannot describe a tree if you don't know what the identity of the tree is. That's me. I want you guys, when you speak next time, please, I thank you, man. You spoke for me, mate. Even yourself, please, don't get me wrong. But let's look at why the refugees are here in Glasgow without identity, without respect, without accommodation, without anything. Of course, one day they walk out in the street, no rain. That's climate change. But please, let's talk about human rights as well. That's why I came here to say I'm here to represent refugees and asylum seekers, not you, because you got ID. I don't, maybe. Some people don't have ID. They can't go to the nightclub. They can't buy anything. And how do you walk around these people? How do you feel when you see them? You come here, you fly from America, you got ID, you got a passport. Some people, my brothers, don't have it. And they live in the central station in the street. When these COP26 come, they move them away, pretend it's all cool. We need to look at that.
Thank you. Thank you. I just wanted to add on because I was really pissed off myself in general since nobody from my community or the entire Siberia, which is like massive landmass, and there are tons of nations and ethnic communities, and none of them are here.
And then I'm randomly called to different panels to just represent it. And I'm not like elected leader or anything like that. I just happen to be here. It's like we need to kind of change it all, so, like empower people and give them voices. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone. You've been a great audience. Thank you.